Flamingo Land in Yorkshire is a theme park that is often overlooked by many, but it has a deep history going back many decades. And in this series, I'm going to cover as much of that as possible. If you've seen my previous series, you know what to expect. I will cover old attractions, old adverts, any celebrities, news that I can find, etc. This series has a little guest, so keep an eye out for him. Let's get started, shall we? Right, so the park opened in 1959 as the Yorkshire Zoological Gardens, and over the next few years they started to add a few sort of funfair rides. It wasn't really a theme park at this point, that still comes further down the line. In some of the earlier pictures I could find here, there was a chimp's tea party, which is a little bit interesting, probably not something we could get away with nowadays. And then I also found pictures of a chimp, may or may not be the same chimp. This was Jackie the chimp, who was a football player, specifically a goalie. Again, interesting thing to have in a park. And then I also found some pictures of some Malayan bear cubs. They're pretty cute as well, but that seems to be sort of the very early years. Some of the stuff I'm going to cover, I'm not 100% sure on the exact year. It's a little bit tricky. The further back I go, the more vague it is. The closer to now it is, the more accurate I can find things that line up. So there's a few things I've found, conflicting dates, so please bear with me. I've sort of tried to get the dates as best as I possibly can. And the first thing to note is that in 1963 the park got some dolphins. Now these were the first dolphins anywhere in the UK, and certainly I think there were some people who were all in favour of this, and there was definitely some who thought this was a terrible idea, and we'll kind of cover that a little bit later on, because it wasn't just the dolphins, but these guys come up a little bit later on as well, so keep an eye out for them. Now 1964, this is the first footage I can find from the park, and you'll see here there's a selection of animals, as well as a few sort of funfair attractions, if you will, in the background. There's some helter-skelters and swings and stuff. There's also a model railway. There's a very short clip here of the sort of land train, which was basically just a tractor decorated with a carriage on the back to carry people around. But that was part of their logo later on, so it was quite important, but I could only find this tiny little clip of it. Now this is when they also added a baby beluga whale to their lineup. Now it was rescued from Canada, and this definitely was another one of these things that was an issue. As I said, the dolphins, and now we've got the whale, and you know, think about nowadays with SeaWorld, there's a lot of contention over this kind of having animals in these environments, and it certainly wasn't popular with everybody. And unfortunately, when this whale arrived, she had a little touch of lung disease. But she was super cute and very friendly and loved interacting with her trainers. There's quite a lot of stuff. Again, the further back you go, the more you just sort of think you wouldn't get away with that nowadays. So in 1966, I found a newspaper clipping about an elephant from the park that was taken to a local car wash and refused to be washed by some bikini girls. And overturned the trough and stamped on it before drinking the soapy water and squirting it everywhere. Why would you take an elephant to a car wash? Now the park had some entertainment at this point, and that was Cowboy City, and I found quite a lot of images of this. It does seem to be quite an immersive area, which at that point would have been one of, if not the only immersive area. As I say, we certainly weren't a theme park at this point. Obviously had live actors and stuff, and you know, shows that they had to entertain people. I do find it kind of interesting though, because if you look at this, again, health and safety has changed so much over the years, but when you look back at these, the guests are right up close to everything that's happening, including live animals that are kind of running about. No fences, nothing. I mean, nowadays you'd need the fences to keep people out because, well, people are stupid. But you didn't back in the 60s because, well, people weren't daft. Now this next one is an image that I'd like some of you guys to help me out with. So I found this picture of a baby with a tortoise. Now, the first time I found this image, it said it was 1966 and it was Gordon Gibb. Now, Gordon Gibb wasn't born until 1975, so it can't be him. I then found some other copies of the image that said it was Stuart Gibb. I don't know who Stuart Gibb is. I've looked. Gordon doesn't seem to have had any siblings. It wasn't his dad. So I don't know who Stuart Gibb is. But this picture seems to have floating around in a few places around Flamingo Land, so if you know anything about this, or specifically who Stuart Gibb is, let me know in the comments. Right, so 1968, the park changes its name to Flamingo Park Zoo. And sticking with the kind of sea life element that we've had so far, they purchased a killer whale, this time known as Cuddles. Now, unlike the beluga that they got that was extremely friendly and loved human interaction, this one not so much, and became extremely aggressive and ended up having to be transferred away from the park. Now, this is the first celebrity I can find as well in 68, and that is Ken Dodds, with a couple of bears known as Diddy and Doddy. It's also the first map that I can find of the park, and what I find really interesting, and again, obviously at this point, they were not a theme park, and that is pretty clear because there's a tiny little section at the back for a fairground, and everything else is a zoo. The other thing that's kind of interesting, if you look at the front, where the entrance is, they had a petrol station. I mean, that'd be really convenient, and the only place I can think of, the only theme park I could think of for the petrol station is Disney. So, yeah. Well, they used to have one, apparently. Got another clip here that shows a selection of the animals for the time, and there was things like giraffes and bears, and of course flamingos. I mean, it wouldn't be Flamingo Land or Flamingo Park at this point without flamingos. But I also found they had a parrot show, and the parrots used to ride bicycles, which is pretty impressive. Right, so in 1970 we're starting to see some stuff being added here. I mean, we're still not a theme park by any stretch of the imagination, but we got some attractions, one of which was a rock slide, or the rock slide I should say, which is basically, as the name suggests, a set of slides. I kind of moved around the park a little bit, but that was the first permanent installation, if you will, that I can find. And again, as I've said already, some of these I can't be spot on with the dates, but it was somewhere around about 1970-ish that Daktari Express, the miniature gauge railway, came along, which, of course, as you know, sort of takes you around parts of the park. 72 saw another attraction added, quite a big one this time, and that was a water ride known as the Crazy Water Creek. Now, I mean, theming clearly wasn't their strong point, because there's a whale here that looks like it's paper mache. And then there's tons of sort of water effects that look like you're going to get wet, but from what I can tell, the boat protected you, so you didn't. So it's just that kind of illusion that you're going to get drenched. Unlike some of the rides they've got nowadays where you do get wet. Now around this time they added the Haunted Castle Railway, which as far as I can tell was in the building that is now used for Mischief Mansion. And this was a tracked dark ride. The only thing I can find is some footage from around about 2000. It was sort of a behind the scenes of this ride. And to be honest with you, it looks absolutely dire. Really, really, really basic. Pretty much just going through black rooms with the odd tiny little thing, like an element. It's very much like you go on some of those ghost trains in the fun fair, where you think, why have I just spent £3.50 or more on this thing when there's like one ghost halfway around that goes, That's what this looks like. But as I say, that's the only footage I can find. This could have been like towards the end of its lifespan, I think this was. So maybe they started to strip stuff out at this point, I don't know. If you remember this ride, please do let me know, because yeah, it looks absolutely horrific. Right, this is very random, but I found a guidebook for the park at this point, and the tagline is the happiest place in Britain. Take a look at the mascots. I mean, the panda looks like he's on a mobile phone, which would be impressive for 74, and the elephant looks like he's had some bad news and he's this weird, he's got a human hand. Like, that's the stuff of nightmares. That is not the happiest place in Britain. It's something I found around about 1977, or at least that's the first confirmed reference I can find to this, is Gnome Land. And I don't know too much around this. Apart from the newspaper clipping and one image, I can't find anything else about this. Now, based on its name, I'm assuming it was some walkthrough attraction, like, based around gnomes. But again, if you know more about this, if you remember it, it seems to kind of stuck around for a while from what I can see later on. So hopefully many of you will remember this and you can fill me in the comments down below. Now 78 rounds out the early years because this was quite a transformational year for the park insofar as it was purchased by Robert Gibb. Now he put a team together to turn this into a national tourist attraction. Up until then it was more of a local attraction and he really wanted to make this a kind of national destination and he wanted to invest in all these attractions. Now unfortunately this led to a number of the staff being made redundant, although they did, a lot of them came back as seasonal staff, which, you know, if you know anything about theme parks, that's quite common these days. You do obviously have a core staff, but you have a lot of seasonal staff. And that was a transition that happened at the end of the 70s, getting ready for this to become a theme park. Right, so that's the first part of this series. It is the early years, as I say, there's a bit in there that's a little bit vague, so please bear with me. There's a lot of information coming in the next few episodes. But if you know anything, if you can fill in any of the blanks, please do so. If you've enjoyed this one, make sure you hit that like button and hit that subscribe button to make this number go up. I'll see you next week in the next episode. Adios.